So this is a little different, I imagine, for you too, huh?
This is just a little bit different. I'm used to being the one interviewing people, not the one on the other end of it, but I'm excited about it, man. I mean, this is cool. So, woohoo!
I'm going to give you a chance to interview me when I'm on your podcast. This time I'm going to like take the lead though and see how we can. I was on an actually someone else's. Actually, I've been on a few podcasts, but since I started this one, I was on Temple of Blah. It's a metal podcast out of England, and the guy that's doing it is making a movie, a documentary on Roadrunner Records. And I used to work at Roadrunner. So he interviewed me in New York. And then he said, you know what? I'd like to do a podcast with you. And I said, I'll do one with you if you do one with me, just like we're doing.
Yeah, that really worked out, especially for you being someone that had worked at Roadrunner previously, being able to connect with him like that, and then give him certain insight that maybe he never even thought that he had doing a documentary on the record label itself. You're able to really provide a lot of good insight and create that great connection. And I mean, just be goofy the whole entire time too. What could be better?
Yeah. I like, you know what, Kevin, it's really all about having fun, right? We're supposed to be having fun, right?
Yeah, we're doing this. We're talking about music and we're having a blast. We're living life the way we want to. If we were living life and it wasn't fun, we'd just be kind of going just that like drone on and up, go to work, go home, go to sleep, repeat. Screw that. That's not fun.
So I've been watching a lot of your podcasts, not all the way through every time, but you're really good at this. And I wanted to get your background because I have no idea how old you are, but I'm thinking that you're might not even be 30 yet.
You're actually correct on that. Like when we're recording this right now, I'm 28 years old. I'm gonna be turning 29 at the beginning of December. So, I mean, yeah, I'm still in that younger side of things, and I'm still the guy that'll always just go to concerts. I mean, I was at concerts the past 2 days. One previously was that Ice Nine Kills in This Moment show. I mean, if you're looking at it right now, I'm wearing an Ice Nine Kills shirt, and I'm still one of those guys where the mosh pit opens up and it's usually opening up around me. I'm never one to just
Wow.
just stay away from it. I see it. I'm just like an addict where it's like, oh, here we go. I gotta get in there. Go, 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 go. And I just love it every step of the way. I don't know what it is, but there's just this absolute feel of adrenaline rush and just fun and just life that I feel like when I jump into those pits. And I've met so many random people throughout it too, from not only here where I'm living at in Milwaukee, but I mean, I'll go to Madison, Wisconsin, Green Bay. I'll go down to Chicago all the time, and people don't necessarily know my name, but they always recognize the face. I always wear a Milwaukee Brewers hat in the pit as well. Everyone recognizes it, and it's just like people see that and they know that's where the fun is going to be.
Wow. So that's okay. I wasn't sure. I don't know why I thought you might have been in Chicago, which is not too far from Milwaukee. I used to tour a lot with bands. So my memories of Milwaukee, and I was there 3 or 4 times, is beer, of course. And I did go see a Brewers game actually in an afternoon when I was there. And I do remember it because they were serving frozen margaritas, I think. And I was and I had a show that night. I was drinking frozen margaritas during the day. It ended up being a mess. But Mainstream Records, are they still around?
I don't think so anymore. That used to be a while ago, but I'm not as connected with them nearly. So my mind on if they're still around or not is
It was a record chain back then, probably like 8 to 10 stores, and those guys were really cool. Because when I was working at A&M Records, this is in the '90s, Kevin. You weren't around yet, or
or if I
maybe
was around, I was very, very small.
there you go. And yeah, you were born in the '90s, actually. I can add, believe it or not. So you grew up in Milwaukee. Did you ever like play? And did you play at all?
So when I was a kid, I think it was around maybe 9 or 10 years old. When I was in grade school, it was they had like a band, like a grade school band. Definitely more of an orchestral type thing. And I wanted to try it out. I wanted to get into it. But when it came down to it at that time, of course, my musical taste, my musical influence at like 10 years old, were going to be influenced by more of what my parents were listening to, specifically my dad. And when I was like, 1, 2 years old, my dad, my brother, and I, we'd be in the bass and he'd turn up his old stereo, he'd crank it up, break out the CDs. We'd always listen to Van Halen, ZZ Top, Poison, maybe some Journey in there, maybe some Rush sprinkled in as well. So anything within that hard rock realm I was into. And I started picking up on a couple of other new bands as well at that time. It's like 2004-ish, where starting to get a little bit more of my taste. 3 Days Grace was starting to come into my, foray, because I was playing a lot of video games at the time, and they had a lot of their original on these soundtracks. That was also the time American Idiot by Green Day dropped, so that was kind of getting into myself. And when it came to this, school band, nothing really pertained to me, but there was drums. I'm like, ooh, let's learn to play the drums. And I started to pick up on that, and I tried going forward with that. Got on the kit, started getting some private lessons as well. But when I got into high school, I was playing a lot of soccer as well, because I also am a big sports guy, love playing sports, love being active. And if I decided to do both, play soccer and keep drumming, I was going to end up running myself way too thin, and even at 14 years old. So I decided to make a choice, and I went to go and continue to play soccer. So I haven't even touched a kit since I was maybe 14.
So you're a real fan. You're a real music fan. You're like me. I did play guitar, and I tried to be in bands when I was a teenager, but my hands, you got to have really good hands to be a guitar player. I mean, you got to be able to put up with a lot. People don't tell you that, because they just, once they get into it, they're into it. So they don't talk about that. Some musicians do, but most don't. So your dad was into a lot of music. Was your mom into music too?
My mom was into music, but not as prevalent as my dad was, or as influential as my dad was, because my dad, his favorite time ever, if you ask him, his favorite year ever of existence was 1982. It was just the year that, like, for him, all the stars aligned. He was going to as many concerts as possible. He's a huge Milwaukee Brewers fan. That was the year they made the World Series. So everything around there. My mom, on the other hand, my mom is, and next year in 2024, she's going to turn 70 years old. I'm going to be 29. She's going to be 70. Like, the age disparity is definitely heavily there.
Wow,
And
it is.
the music that she would have been into was, she really liked Paul McCartney, really liked the Beatles. So there was still some of the foray in there, but it was never as prevalent as the stuff that my dad was showing me. But still, it had that rock feel to it. So I was still always exposed to that and always listening to that every time.
So when you were finding these bands, you obviously come from a different generation as I do. I'm closer to your father's age than your age, and radio had already kind of gone down the toilet around the time that you were like a teenager. So where were you finding your bands? Were you already on? Was YouTube? I can't remember when YouTube started, but I imagine it was around at that time. What was it? Where were you finding your music?
So it was in the most random places. I'd find some stuff on video game soundtracks, like any EA Sports game, like the Madden soundtracks, the NASCAR Thunder or NASCAR Chase of the Cup Series soundtracks, WWE SmackDown versus Raw. That was a huge one where it had a lot of 3 Days Grace, had some non-point in there. But the three main places I'd say I wanted was, of course, video games. Guitar Hero was a big one. That's where I first found the band that I first really fell in love with when I was in middle school, which was Disturbed. Found them on Guitar Hero with Guitar Hero 3 when they were in the same set as Slipknot, Queens of the Stone Age, and God, I can't remember who the fourth band was in that set list, but it was a great set list. It was like, okay, we're playing these same songs over and over again. Before I Forget by Slipknot, Stricken by Disturbed, 3 by Queens of the Stone Age, and Knights of Sidonia by Muse. That was the last one. So that was a huge exposure point. And then when I got into high school, my freshman year, I would always drive to school with my brother, my best friend, my best friend's brother, and this one other guy, and we'd always listen to the alternative radio station. And that was really when I decided to, listen to some more music, start to get into more things. And I first heard Savior by Rise Against at that point in time. And that turned me from, okay, Disturbed is my favorite band, to now Rise Against is my favorite band. And I never wavered since that moment when I was 14. The other place I learned it was, started to find more friends, started to discover more friends, new friends. And they would say, hey, let's go to Summerfest in Milwaukee and let's go check out this band. Let's go check out this artist. All right, I'm open to the experience. I'm just happy I'm hanging out with friends at this point. And the big one at that time that I really got into and got introduced to, and I think it was 2012, was Hollywood Undead. So it started really in that capacity, but it was a lot easier to get exposed to some of these bands that people were mentioning, because at that time, it's like 2009, 2010, I could go on a YouTube, type them in, and their music videos are there, or someone just put the lyric video up, but I could still listen to it, and I wasn't waiting on radio to get to it if I didn't want to. If I had the means to really want to go out and listen to these bands, I could go and do it.
Did you, when you were listening, you mentioned Guitar Hero, did you do Rock Band too?
Not as much as Guitar Hero, because when we were growing up, it was my brother and I, we were the ones that had Guitar Hero, and then my best friend that lived across the street, about a year later, he got Rock Band, but we were always so much more into Guitar Hero. We just kind of stuck at our house and we're just cranking it out. And I gotta say, it was fun playing, Guitar Hero 3 at like midnight. All of a sudden, my dad gets home from work because he works second shift, and he sees me just ripping to some Van Halen.
The reason I'm asking is, I'm from Boston, even though I lived in LA and New York when I worked for record labels most of my life. Bane Camaro, though, both of the guys that started that band, Alejandro and Bryn Bennett, have both been on my show. And they were like, Bane Camaro became famous because of Rock Band and Guitar Hero. That's where their songs first appeared. And I didn't know if you were familiar with them or not, but I think it might have been before. They were in the original ones, the original, I can't remember what was first. Was Rock Band before Guitar Hero, or because I never got it, I never did this.
I
I'm
was
not,
the first, I believe it was the first three versions of Guitar Hero came out before the first Rock Band game came out. But of course, when Rock Band came out, it introduced a different concept where, yeah, you still are playing guitar as well, but they also introduced the fact that you could have a drum set and you could also do vocals at the same time, which then Guitar Hero implemented following, because yeah, Guitar Hero is going to be specific more for the guitar side of things, but they were not be able to compete with Rock Band going forward had they not had those aspects in there.
yeah, it's interesting that you found your music that way. You're really into heavier stuff, which is cool with me because I worked for, Metal Blade Records. I worked for Roadrunner, and I ran a punk label called Giant Records. So I basically have worked with I worked with Dag Nasty, Government Issue, Verbal Assault, but I also worked with Fates Warning, Lizzie Borden, DRI. You mentioned Poison. I worked with them when I was at Enigma Records, and I've worked with a lot of heavy bands over my whole life, but I'm kind of like, I'm a little more open-minded. I'm not saying you're not, but I'm very open-minded where I'm into indie rock. And, I had a guy that directed a rap film on my show recently, which is totally different because I'm not much of a hip hop guy, but indie rock I like, and I like some alt country stuff. Wilco, they're from Chicago, not Milwaukee. Forget you're from Milwaukee. Are you actually from right in Milwaukee or a suburb?
No, I'm from Milwaukee. If you look at my license, it says Milwaukee, Wisconsin on there.
That's fantastic, man. That's a great little town there. Madison too. Madison college town, always good for music. So you were a fan for a long time, and I imagine you've gone to a million shows.
Yeah, by the time I reach the end of the year, my goal every year is to try and hit 50 shows.
Wow.
Last year I came in, I think 4 or 5 short. This year by early December, I'm going to hit 50, and I should end around 54 or 55 total.
This isn't what I was going to ask you, but I will. What were some of the best shows you saw this year?
Oh boy. Okay, so let me see if I'll give you 5. I'll give you the top 5 if I can think
I
of
love
it.
lists. I love if you listen to my show, I love lists.
So probably my favorite one of the entire year was opener was Wargasm, and then Vended, and the headliner was Bloodywood, a metal band from India. And just the way that the crowd interacted with everybody, the way that we had about half the crowd was of Indian descent, and I'm talking about India.
Yeah.
And then the other half were just rock and metal fans. But when Wargasm went on, the crowd was going nuts. Vended goes on. All of a sudden, I'm wondering why the middle of pit is getting all wet. They're throwing their water bottles into the pit so we have something to drink. And we're just like, okay, this is pretty cool. Bloodywood comes on. The place just loses its mind. And it was just one of the coolest things ever. Everyone was into it. There was no issue with anybody. And then half of the guys from Bloodywood came into the pit and moshed with us during one song.
What was the venue?
The Metro in Chicago.
Oh, Metro. Wow. Yeah. Nice. I've been to Metro. Yeah, cool. So you do go to Chicago for shows too?
Yeah, and I was going to say one of the next shows I was going to bring up as one of my favorites was actually at the Metro in Chicago as well, which would have been in March, and like the last weekend of March, it was like late March, early April. Rise Against did a 3-day residency at the Metro, and they were going to play a lot of stuff they haven't played recently or ever. And I went to 2 of those shows, and the Saturday one that I went to, they played so many deep cuts that I love that I never heard before live. And as one of my friends put it, you looked like you were one of the happiest, most menacing people in the pit. Like you were hitting everybody left and right with the biggest smile on your face. I've never seen you more enjoy life more than that moment.
Have you ever gone into a hardcore pit?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there a difference for you when you go to a hardcore show and a metal show?
Oh, absolutely. When it comes to a hardcore show, I have to keep my head even more on a swivel because I'm seeing people, they're crowd killing, slam dancing. And when it comes to a hardcore show, that's really not my style of when I go in a pit. I'm more of the, throw your shoulder into people, push people, wall of death, that kind of stuff. But I know what I'm getting myself into at that point. So if I get hit in the face, if I get, if I get like put on the ground, yeah, I'm not going to be mad about it because I know the situation. And I've seen like this year was that Motionless in White tour with After the Burial, Knocked Loose, and Alpha Wolf. And I've been even like last year was Knocked Loose and Kubla Khan. It's shows like that where I've taken hits to the face, I've gotten just beat up, and it's something where it's a different mindset. But if you're going in there and everyone knows what's going on,
You know what to expect. Yeah.
you know what to expect. I don't
Yeah.
get hit in the face that much there because I'm always kind of looking out for that point in time. Because again, I don't want to end up getting hit in the face and then
Yeah.
have a dislocated jaw and have to go off to the side, and then I'm out for a couple of different shows, or I'm out for a week or two. I don't want to have to deal with that, especially because I probably have a show that I have to go to within the next couple of days anyway.
Yeah, I didn't mean to go away from your list because I want to hear the rest of it, but I was just curious because I'm more of a hardcore fan than a metal fan, although I like a lot of metal, but I'm old school hardcore, Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Bad Brains, SSD Control, Gangrene, that's more my speed. The newer hardcore bands, I don't really know much about, to be honest with you. And you know what? You've already named a few metal bands. I'm not familiar with either. So what were some of the other shows? Anything more mainstream, or is it more like underground that you're into?
Probably the more mainstream one that definitely was a definite like highlight for me was going to Louder Than Life this year, because my second straight year going to Louder Than Life, and the final day, the headliner was Green Day. And this is my first time ever seeing Green Day. Of course, it's the last day. I've been in the pit for 4 straight days. I'm gonna say 5 straight days because the day beforehand, before Louder Than Life, I was at that After the Burial, Alpha Wolf, Knock Loose, Motionless in White show, which was definitely a heavy hitter. So Green Day's coming on. I'm gonna hang out with my friends on this one because they're not gonna go into the pit. Okay, I haven't spent that much time with them because they're not always in the pit. I am, and we decided to watch Green Day. I was like, okay, I just want to see American Idiot play live, and that's it. Green Day played for 2 hours. They only played like 1 or 2 songs before that were after American Idiot. Otherwise, they played a lot of American Idiot, a whole lot of Dookie, and a couple of songs in between. The energy was nonstop. It was one of the best shows. Not that I've saw this year, but that's one of the best like live shows I've ever seen with what Green Day put on. It was ungodly fantastic.
But you're gonna like this. One of the Green Day was involved in one of the best live shows I ever saw too. Woodstock '94, the Mud Fight.
The Mud Fight. Oh my, you were there?
I was at the Mud Fight, man. It was like literally the craziest thing. I feared for those guys, man. I was like, because so many people were throwing stuff at them, and I was like, and I guess Billy Joe got a tooth knocked out, and his arm got fucked up. I mean, it was like basically it was crazy, man. That was, and plus it was in the middle of this huge 3-day event, because I went to, I was working for A&M Records at the time, and we did the soundtrack for Woodstocks. So I had free reign of the place. I saw 28 bands in 3 days. I was like seeing as much as I could. And that was not easy to do because there were 2 stages, like Green Day played at the second stage, which is still like enormously huge. But I gained a lot of respect for them that day that they were able to like survive that.
Oh, absolutely. You have to respect that. It's you can't go away from that. It's something that's just absolutely incredible if they're going to put on a show like that with everything else that's going on. But it's also when, you bring up Woodstock 94, a lot of people when they hear that, they think about the mud fight with Green Day.
Yeah, and a lot of people get confused too, and they're like, "Oh, was that the Limpet?" No, no, that was '99. That was like bullshit. I didn't go to that. I'm glad I didn't because that
Yeah.
turned into a fucking nightmare. But '94 was great. I mean, that one night when they had Nine Inch Nails, Metallica, and Aerosmith right in a row, and they each played for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. It was insane, dude. I mean, you can't even imagine seeing those three bands right in a row like that. It was just crazy. And they did the longer sets at Woodstock. So I loved it, man. So you were going to shows for a long time. When did you start your podcast?
So I started the podcast. I think the first episode ever came out in late February of 2019. So I'm almost at like that absolute 5 year mark of releasing episodes, putting stuff out there. And it really all started because I think it was like back in 2017. So I had just graduated college and
Where'd
now
you go to school, by the way?
I went to the University of Minnesota.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Go ahead.
And so this is great. Like I went to the University of Minnesota. I studied economics there. So why am I podcasting and talking about rock and metal music and interviewing bands? Like that doesn't make any sense for what I went to school for. But after I got out of school and got into the workforce, I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes. I learned maybe within the first like 2 months that this like the life that I had thought for myself was the worst possible thing I could have done. I hated going to work during the day. I hated going to an office. I hated playing office politics. And my biggest thing that I hated was wake up, go to work, and it felt like nothing else was going on. Then I'd leave, I'd go to the gym because, okay, I've been sitting around for 8, 9 hours during the day. I got to get up and do something, otherwise I'm become way too sedentary. But then I'm going to go home, I'm going to sit down, eat, and it's like nighttime already. So maybe watch some Netflix or something and go to sleep. The repetition of that just absolutely was brutal on me. And during that time, I was struggling to deal with that, struggling to deal with the change in life from where I was in college to the working world. The girlfriend that I had, we broke up, and that was like one of the biggest like catalysts of just like sending me down this massive depression spiral. So trying to detail like, okay, what's going on? Like, why am I hating myself? And how can I get out of this? The one thing that was always consistent for me during that time was listening to music because I could actually try and bring myself back to it. I was listening to a good amount of I think it was the first 30 Seconds to Mars albums, listened to a good amount of Skillet, and specifically once I went to go see Rise Against play for the first time since that breakup, ooh, that was the first time I jumped into the pit too. And it was like, I don't know what this is, but I have something here. Like I have something here. So as time went on, trying to find something creative, I tried basically creating an online community of all these rock and metal fans. I'm like, that's what I want to do. But to try and add more to it, it's like, let's start a YouTube channel. Let's start doing album reviews. Let's start trying all these different pieces. Hey, why not give my hand and try a podcast and just see what happens? And over time, started a podcast. It started working just by myself. And right before the pandemic hit, I started interviewing more bands because I'm like, this seems like it might be more fun. Yeah, I basically started interviewing bands. Did a couple in 2019, started doing more video interviews right at the beginning of 2020. And once the pandemic hit, I'm like, I got this because everyone's on the shelf right now. No one's doing anything. So they can't do anything. So what's one way that these younger bands can promote their music? Hey, I'm right here. Let's go do this.
You were so far ahead of me because I started January 2019, but you have way more shows than I do. And I know why, because when I was doing all my early shows, I had it in my head because I'm not a technical person. I got to go to a studio and have an engineer. So I paid engineers for like my first 150 episodes until I bought this microphone and plugged it in my laptop and realized, what the hell am I doing? I was like spending a lot of money to make this podcast on a regular basis. And now I know why you have more. Well, you know what you're doing, which we'll get into later. A couple of questions I wrote down here. Rise Against the World I Know. I know that's not the typical Rise Against song, but I absolutely love that song. The first time I heard it, I ended up watching the video like so many times. It just, I wasn't in the military, but it still hit home with me. I think anyone that's from this country, and like I remember when I was in college, the recruiters were always there in the lobby in college trying to recruit you to go in the service, you know? And so when I heard that song, it was like, that really hit me. I wanted to mention that. Minnesota, did you do college radio?
I did not do college radio. I didn't do anything of the sort. And
God,
which
you seem like such an old school DJ. I don't get it.
I didn't really start to figure out this stuff and really just get and embrace it until after I went through that, 2017 where, life turned upside down. I had, from that moment beforehand, I had a completely different outlook on my life. I had a completely different idea of where I wanted to go with it. And anything within music was just nowhere near the source. Anything with college radio, nowhere within the idea. I had a friend who did college radio, and even at one point in time, I thought, maybe that's something I could get into. But then I backed off it because I had other ideas of things I wanted to try out. Had I gone in and done that, though, this is always a weird question I think about. And I got asked this one other time from some publication. It was, do you wish you would have started the podcast earlier? Wish you would have started this journey earlier? And I always look at that as a loaded question. It was like 5 years earlier than I did. If I would have, or if I would have gone into this in college, would I have gotten maybe a bigger head start than I would have had? Yeah, possibly. But given where my mind was at the time, I might not have wanted to stick with it. I might have just said, this really isn't for me. I don't want to give the time commitment to it because my interests are in other places. When I started, this is where my full interest was. So when those eventual, bumps in the road, those eventual pitfalls, those eventual times where you're thinking about potentially quitting and, you have to pick yourself up and keep going. Yeah, my mind, my mind was already still so focused in on this and wanting to do this and so excited about it where nothing was going to break it. Had I started doing college radio in college, I probably would have lost, enjoyment of it due to the fact that I probably wouldn't have had nearly as much free reign to do whatever I wanted with it as I do being a one-man show here.
I was the music director at my college radio station. I did it for 2 years because I had to transfer. It was at a 4-year and I came from a 2-year. Then I went to a non-commercial station and worked there for a while. Then I bought a one-way ticket to LA because I needed to work for a record company. And I did. I got a job at a label, and I spent my whole life working for labels and managing bands. But when I first saw you and was listening to you, I'm like, oh, this guy came from radio. I was convinced you were a radio guy because you do it so well. You have like that, you have a different style than I do. You're more uppity all the time. I get up sometimes, but I'm not always as up as you are. You're like really enthused, which is good, man. I love, and I was going to compare a couple of interviews that you and I did with the same people to verify that point. But let me get to that first. Is your audience more a YouTube audience or is it the listening platforms? Because for me, my audience is Apple and Spotify, and YouTube is just a bonus. So when I get a show, like I've had a couple get in the thousands, to me, it's a bonus, but is YouTube your main focus?
YouTube is my main focus. So you and I differ completely on that. And when it comes to a lot of other podcasters as well, a lot of different podcast communities that I'm in, I'm the only one that's primarily focusing on YouTube. And my main reason for that was because when I started these things out, it was YouTube ended up being the place where my audience started to get a little bit more consistent. So I'm like, okay, let's try new things here. Let's try putting out there. Plus, I love the video aspect of it. I love the idea of if you enjoy an artist and you want to get to know them, you want to have a chance to be able to see them and interact with them in that capacity. It's a lot easier to form your own first impression opinion on an artist, especially from a podcast, if you can see them as well.
I agree. I just can't get the views on some of my shows.
I understand that too, because I struggle with that at times as well, where there's some shows where it's like, okay, this one didn't do nearly as well, but then the two biggest episodes I ever had to date, the YouTube was the main reason behind it, because had I just stuck with, so this is the crazy thing, had I just stuck with Apple Podcasts and Spotify for that, The initial episode, the first episode I did, that was gonna, because it was the only one that was on both audio and visual. The audio version had 1,000 downloads, which is fantastic, which is awesome. The video version as of right now has 23,000.
Yeah, it's that voice of, I don't know if I can pronounce the name right, Basaprot. Is that how you?
I think it's voice of Bachaprat, because they're from Indonesia. I
Eh,
messed it up the first time, and fans were just like, "You got to pronounce it like this. You got to pronounce it like this." So when I interviewed them live, like a couple months later, I'm like, "It's in my head. Like I'm not messing up this pronunciation."
Basaprot. Basaprot. Did I say it right?
Bachaprat. It's like bachelor, but like
Bachaprot. Oh
bacha,
boy.
like bacha, not but prat, but then not lur. So it's like bachelor, bachaprat. That's how they told me to do it.
I can't, I hate it when I mispronounce someone's name and then I hear it and then I find out I said it wrong and I'm like, oh boy, what can you do now? So that's really interesting that we are opposite in that respect, because I am going totally for the listening audience, and the people have been pushing me, oh, do more with YouTube. And then I did get a couple of videos that hit the thousands and I was like, okay, maybe this will work. But then when I see the next one barely getting to 100, I'm like, I don't know about this. I'm getting 500 people listening on Apple, but 100 people on YouTube. And I'm like, I couldn't figure it out. Obviously, your audience is bigger than mine, which I give you credit for that. And I'm going to try and steal some of your ideas now. One of the ideas. One of the ideas that I wish I would do more of is your shorts are great. You do a lot of not shorts like YouTube defines them, but you'll do a 9-minute thing. Like I saw something following in reverse. You did a thing
Yeah.
where they covered a Papa Roach song and you had the video and you talked, and I was like, I love that, man. I loved what you did with that. That
Yeah,
was
I was gonna say, because that was the reaction content stuff where I decided to jump into that as just an extra piece for the YouTube channel, because I'd seen how popular, reaction stuff had gotten. And I'm like, I want to try some of this stuff. I want to see where I can go with it. And one of my big inspirations for that was taking a look at all these other different YouTube reactors and how they did it, and then actually jumping to what Nick Nocturnal would do when he used to do reactions a lot. And I was wondering, why did I like his, for Nick Nocturnal specifically, more than I like these other reactors? And the one thing that Nick did that the other reactors didn't was, when he was reacting to a song, he let the whole thing play through and react to it while it was going on. Because it was, in my opinion, I'm like, this is a lot more genuine. You get a lot more fun with it. You don't get those stops in there, because if I'm leading up to something, if I know a song is leading up to a huge breakdown and you pause it right before that breakdown hits, I'm gonna be sitting there like, your energy and your flow and the momentum of what you were going for the reaction, it's not gonna be as strong because you're not getting the full experience of the song right then and there. So that's where I looked at, and when Nick stopped doing it and you're not doing it nearly as much, I'm like, that's a style I like the most. So let me put my style on it, my own take on it, but do it where consistently, if I'm gonna play the song, I'm gonna play it all the way through, react to it at that time, and then really dive deep further into the song in the post of the full song. Because again, I want to listen to the song, especially if it's for the first time, and roll with it and have fun with it. And I've gotten a good amount of reaction off that. And it's specifically with, the Falling in Reverse video was a good one. But the ones where I'm really getting a good amount of traction consistently is Japanese metal bands. I'm going down the Japanese metal band rabbit hole with bands like, I already knew who Baby Metal was. I already liked Baby Metal.
I just checked them out actually recently. Yeah.
Yeah, but through this, like, I'm checking out bands like Nemophilia, Bandmade, Hanabiye, Broken by the Screams, and there's like even more I want to get into as well.
Wow.
And it's so cool because the fans there are very, very passionate about those bands. And I'm like, okay, let's see what I can do and like see if I can get, I'm not trying to like tap and be like, oh, hey, always come over here, but like I want to become a part of these communities too. I want to get to understand these bands, and if I like them, I want to bring them to more people. So when I first listened to Bandmate, I was like, how did I let this slip through the cracks? And then I reacted like, I think I've done like 6 of their songs so far. I saw them play live, and when I mentioned I was going to see him play live, the comments are just like, dude, go see him play live. Go see him. Go see him. You're going to have a blast. You're going to enjoy it. Wasn't the full mosh pit style show that it would enjoy, but seeing him play live in the middle of Chicago at like 11:30 at night for a Lollapalooza after show that didn't get done till 1:15 in the morning. I had to go to work the next day. I look back at it and I say this, 100% worth it.
This is what I mean, folks, about this guy's enthusiasm, man. You can hear it, you could see it right now. It's happening, right as we sit here. You're Gen Z, right?
No, I'm back end of millennial because
Okay.
I was
Well,
born at the end of '94.
okay. So, see, I think that's the difference that you're way more technically able to do things than I am. I mean, it would take me a long time to figure out how to put a video and talk and have it on the screen while I'm talking. I mean, I'm just not into the technical stuff, but that's okay. I'm not trying to do what you do because I have a different approach, as you've noticed. I'm more like, I want to know where, like, I'm talking to you right now. I want to know where you grew up. I want to know what you listen to. I want to know your story from the beginning to the end. That's how I do my interviews. I'm not going to change it just because I like what you're doing, which I really do, by the way. I really like what you're doing. But I like you get into a band and you have them on several times and you talk about them and you dissect them. And I love that. I call you a geek with the highest regard of the word, believe me. And that the band, I'm going to botch their name again. So I'm going to let you say Voice of
Voice of Bachaprat.
Bachaprat. You've talked to them in person. You've
Yeah.
dissected their videos and you have a relationship with them. And I think that's incredible, man. I'm starting to revisit bringing some people back to the show for a second time. Some people I've had on 2 or 3 times. That's a concept that works, wouldn't you say?
It absolutely does. And it works for me in a couple of different capacities. The first thing is it works where if I'm bringing bands back, it seems like if you want to come to my podcast for a place where you have like this certain band, at least one point throughout the year, you're going to get an update on that band. And it's always the second part, what I love even more about it is I get to develop, get to develop friendships with these guys or with these bands. Because for me, it was the second band I ever interviewed is a band called Kingdom Collapse. I got to interview them because someone who is a huge Disturbed fan who I connected with right before their Evolution album came out knew them as a local band in her area and said, hey, go check them out. So I interviewed them and I've interviewed them every single year since I started the podcast. So there's 5 episodes, I believe they're out there. One from 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. There will be one in 2024. And same thing with a former band called GFM. I always would interview those ladies. Interview this guy named Joey Arena from Outlier. I interview him every single year. The first time I ever interviewed him too, he was in a dingy basement and the internet connection wasn't very good. And after we said, let's table this till tomorrow, let's give it another shot. He was a half hour late to the next one. I was right about to say, I'm done. Let's screw this. I can't do this.
I hate when they're late and they forget. Ugh.
But he jumped on. He said, hey, I'm finishing recording something with my producer. I'm sorry. Here, can you talk to him for 10 minutes? Why the heck would I want to talk to your producer for 10 minutes? Puts it on the phone, and it is Justin DeBleek, the former guitarist for Ice Nine Kills. And I was wearing, I think I was wearing this exact same shirt that day, and I'm just sitting there like, hi. One of the wackiest things ever. But from that, I got to have this fantastic conversation with Joey. I've seen him perform live once. Same thing with the guy named Joey Tyler from Varsity. Fantastic guy. Recently, I'm on the podcast too. Became friends with Benny from the band Avoid. One of the most wild bands you'll ever see live. If you get a chance to go see him, I highly suggest it. It is off the wall nuts. But it's fantastic because I get to bring these bands back on. I get to develop friendships with them. But my favorite thing to do out of all of it, and it's something I got to do yesterday with the band I recently had in the podcast called Howling Giant, I get to go see them perform live. And then I get to go and just say hi to them after the show. And it's like, hey, look, Kevin came. Hey, man, how's it going? Thanks for coming out. And they actually show that support and actually create even further that connection so that when we get to do another podcast in the future, we can always look back on them and be like, hey, how's it going? How are you doing? Where's life been since that moment? And we can talk about that specific show as well and some of the crazy things that have happened from that time, or even some of the crazy stories that have happened when we've gotten together at times. Because, yeah, that's happened before with some bands, and they can be wild.
You're establishing relationships, and that's a good thing, man. Your show is really. Now, I have to ask you, do a lot of publicists get in touch with you to try and get guests on your show?
More recently than it was, because originally it was me reaching out all the time to publicists like gangbusters. Do I still have to do that, especially for some of the bigger bands I want to bring on? Of course, of course. But there are some bands that I get sent like, hey, do you want to interview this band? We're pitching you this one. One of the more recent ones I got was a band called Lilac. They're currently on tour with Pop Evil and Fame on Fire. I got pitched them right away, and I was like, huh, I was supposed to go and see them, but I couldn't go to the show because I interviewed two bands that day. Plus, it was Halloween and it decided to snow like and drop 4 inches on Milwaukee, which was really hard to like actually visually drive through because it came down all like right at the time I was going to be leaving for the show because it was in Madison. I was like, oh, well, it looks like I got 2 episodes to do. But being able to just have this band just get pitched to me, I'm like, okay, let's take a listen to them. Let's see what happens. Listen to one song. Okay, let's go for it. And the episode went, the interview was fantastic. Just free flowing, fun, had a great time, got some deep insights into how they write their music and how they do their lyrics between both a female vocalist and then a male vocalist who primarily like raps over it. So think like Evanescence style from their original album. And it was just one of the coolest things. But I love having the fact that I get people and publicists to reach out to me, hey, do you want to check out this band? Because now it's, instead of me having to go out and search all these things up, I get people sending me music. And then it makes it my job even easier with everything else going on in life to find new music, discover new music, and even discover more new bands to bring on the podcast and show to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I can totally relate to everything you're saying. When I started, I had my list, and I've gotten a lot of the people on the list, but now I have a lot of publicists contacting me regularly. Otherwise, I never would have gotten some of the guests I've gotten. But the difference is a lot of my guests are a lot older than your guests because I do a lot of older classic rock or 80s acts, or even Carlos Alomar, who was David Bowie's guitar player, was on my show, and he's probably close to 80, and I had the drummer of the Yardbirds, Jim McCarty. He's 80 years old, so I mean, it's like a lot of my guests are older than touring bands. I don't get to go and see them because a lot of them aren't touring anymore, but so there's definitely differences. Let's talk about Muriel Loveland for a minute. She'll love that we're talking about her. I got pitched her through a publicist, and but I don't think you did, because I heard you telling a story about how you tracked her down on Facebook.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was I think it was someone commented on one of the different groups that I'm in, because this would have been, I think God, when did I interview her? Give me a quick second because I have my whole entire spreadsheet.
It was 2 years ago. I know that for facts. I remember you got her way before I did.
That was October of 21, and I think it was something where
exactly 2 years ago.
one of the groups that I was in, or still am in, I believe, it was someone mentioned her music, and I thought, you know what, let's go check it out. And for her type of music, for my style, completely different. But there are a number of great bands and great artists that I've been able to discover and learn about and actually get to enjoy that I never probably would have because of just the type of music that I like. So I always say, hey, I might not be into your music, but if I like your sound just off of that, I'll bring you on the podcast. Let's see what we can do. I remember reaching out to her and she was like, yeah, let's go do it. And it was another episode where I look back and I think that was an absolute blast. I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, I watched that episode, and you did something really good at the beginning of it. See, one of the things that I've tried to do is keep politics out of my podcast, because people that know me and know me well know where I stand politically. I'm a really liberal person. I can say it to you right now. But not everyone that you get on the show is like that. I've interviewed a lot of people that I know are conservative, and that's fine. So I try not to bring up politics. And it came up really early on in your interview because she was talking about how she was pissed off about all the anti-vaxxers and everything. And I liked the way you handled it. You kind of didn't. You just said, I kind of like to stay in the middle and not, because you have to do that, because the last thing you want to do is alienate your audience, and I don't know who's your audience is. And sometimes I don't even know my own audience, and I don't want to alienate someone because they believe in something that I don't believe in. So that was the first thing because it took a while for you to get to the music
Yeah.
And that wasn't like that when I interviewed, or I jumped right into it, you know. And sometimes the guests will try and divert you away from what you want to talk about. But you did a great job with her, because I know that's not your type of music.
Yeah, it's not my type of music at all, and kind of a little bit of a different than what you were bringing up with, sometimes you have guests that try and divert, even though you have a specific thing you really want to focus in on. I tend to, whenever some of those diversions happen, my tendency is to lean into them and see where the craziness might end up coming in, because you never know. That's for me and my mindset. That's how you get to know some of these bands beyond belief, and let's bring that up. So when it came to Mariel, and we were talking about more the anti-vax stuff at that time. I always look and think about politics and discuss them as, look, when it comes to certain issues, I tend to stand a little bit sometimes more on the conservative side, just given my background, specifically when it came to studying economics and really getting into that, focusing in on that. However, there are some aspects of politics where I do tend to agree with the liberals more. It just depends on the issue. So when I talk with people about it, I think about how I debate with my best friend, or even converse with my best friend. We'll talk and we'll bring up these different points. We're not trying to force you to learn about I'm not trying to get you to, follow my point, to agree with my point. I'm not going to try and beat you down with words or beat you down with ideas to get you to that point. What we're going to try and do is we're going to try and present arguments, and we're going to try and basically say, well, you're bringing up this. Well, have you thought about this? We're going to try and just get you to understand where we're coming from. And if you change your mind, that's on you. But we just want you to understand where we're coming from. So when I talk to guests on the podcast that have different political opinions than me on certain aspects, it's trying to just have that understanding of, you have a different opinion, I have a different opinion. Let's talk about it. Let's compare notes and see what happens. And no matter what, we still respect each other at the end of the day, because we are human. That's another reason too, where, like I said, I'm a little bit more conservative, but my favorite band is Rise Against, who are, incredibly liberal in terms of what they like and what they believe. But their music connects so much with me, and I get to learn about some of these other topics and the way that they go about their music, where, why would I want to be ignorant to that fact? Why would I want to be ignorant to what other people are thinking, to get a fuller understanding of the world, get a fuller understanding of where people are coming from, so we can make those connections stronger and not be divided by something as trivial as one political opinion.
You're not only enthusiastic, but you're logical. Because that is good logic, because I don't really want to either, and when it comes up, sometimes I like you, I want to hear the other side. And I've had someone one time on a phone call, a musician, give me their political views for an hour straight, and I didn't agree with anything they said at all, but I listened to the whole thing. I had to, because he was a friend of mine. But you also interviewed the Dolly Rots. Did you seek them out, or did their publicist track you down?
That was actually kind of funny, because when it came to it, I was looking for more guests to bring on. I was looking for guests to bring on that were having new music coming out rather recently at that time. And it was October of 2023, which would have been, the previous month before I recorded this. And I still work a full-time job because the podcast is not making me nearly enough money to support myself. And at that time for October, that's always where I work. That's always the busiest month of the year. So I'm like, okay, I just want to try and find something. Started listening to music. I'm like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to bring them on. Let's see. Before I reach out to their publicist, let me just look through my emails and see if this was pitched to me at all. Because sometimes, I'm looking through stuff. It's hard to get to every little aspect of every band when you got like 20 new albums to listen to every single week. But I was looking through it, and all of a sudden, about a week before like the week earlier, I had gotten that email. And I was like, okay, now I've got their publicist. Now I've got, the information there. The connection's already there. Let's reach out and let's try and make something happen. And that's how I ended up going in about that. And I think we had it set up, and we had an interview within the 3 days of that happening. So we were ready to go. We were rolling. We were consistently flowing. And that's kind of how that's happened. I did the same thing with Shaylee from the band Dayshell. He's the original clean vocalist from Of Mice and Men. I wanted to interview him. I've always wanted to interview him. And it was like, okay, now's the time. I got to reach out to him. He's got a brand new album coming out. I had no idea that his album, the advanced stream of it from their publicist, was already sitting in my email. So I was like, let's go. We got to get on this. And boom, it happened. It hit. It was a good episode. And I still end up messaging Shaylee every now and again. We still talk every back and forth. And we had the interview, I think, 2 months ago. So again, creating those relationships, it goes a long way.
I actually like I like publicists. I have kind of an old school approach to that because I worked with publicists, and I worked for labels, so I know what their job's like. So it makes it easy for me when I get pitched on these people. And I only interviewed Kelly. You had Kelly and Luis. I wish I had them both because together they were great. But Kelly's great too. She's a disc jockey too. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like. Um, Now you're far more technically inclined, like we mentioned before. So have you taken it technically everywhere you want to take it? Or do you have other ideas that you want to implement into the show now, as far as the technical aspect goes? Because you went out and you probably bought that microphone and the headset and everything, and you taught yourself, I imagine, all of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. There was no one that I knew that at the time when I started this that knew anything about audio engineering, knew anything about podcasting. So when it came to just finding, okay, find a microphone, when it came to figuring out what mixer I wanted to get or what mixer was going to work, what software was going to be viable for me, not only to record and make sure that the audio quality was solid, but make sure that the video quality that I wanted was going to be solid as well. There was a good amount of trial and error in there because if you go back to, I think it was compared to where I was like the first like actual video interview that I did, I believe I may have been using the same mic, but I was using a different mixer that was much more in tune for live audio and not recorded audio over a computer. Or when it came to the audio software, I was using GarageBand. Yeah, and then when it came to video, I was using Skype. Of course, over the next year, I was doing more research trying to figure out what was going to work for me best. Now I've got one of those Focusrite Scarlett mixers. I use Adobe for everything when it comes to Premiere Pro,
Oh
Adobe.
God, you're so far more advanced than me.
And
You're
then
making.
use Zoom as
Oh,
well because Zoom was the best way to go about it to get everything I needed from the guest side if they weren't
yeah.
able to provide it for me on their own. So I was like, you know what? In my aspect, how can I make this best for me, but also easiest for my guests at the same time as well?
Yeah, I don't have I'm plugged straight into my MacBook. So you're making me feel like a real amateur over here. But I think that my guests, I somehow get the audio to always be okay. I don't know how I'm doing it, but I go through Anchor. I don't know who are now owned by Spotify. I don't know if you have a middle person or do you go straight to Apple and Spotify?
Oh, good question. So when it comes to the audio stream thing, specifically for Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I go through Captivate. But when
Okay.
it comes, oh, but that's just for distribution of the audio to those places and tracking numbers, everything around there. When it comes to actually the production of the audio, I mean, if I'm interviewing a guest, like say when I'm going to be interviewing you, yeah, not if I was going to be, when I get to interview you on the other side like this, I'll have Adobe Audition open and I'll be recording your vocals right from where you are. Like right how Zoom is playing out there. My vocals, on the other hand, are going to come straight from the mic into my mixer, into the computer, so that I have the different channels and I can differentiate between the audio. I can clean up any weird background noises. I can match volume level so that when we're talking and when people are listening to it, you don't have to have like that moment of like, okay, now I got to turn the volume down here, up here, down here, because no one's going to do that. Everyone's going to just listen to that for a minute, get annoyed, and jump to the next thing with how many other options are out there. I have to make it as easy for the guest that they want to keep coming on, that they don't have any issues, and as easy for the listener and the viewer as possible. Because if anyone's going to take on the burden when it comes to any side of the production creation of this stuff, it has to be me.
Yeah.
Because the audience is the one that needs to have the easiest time to listen to this, watch it. The guests have to have the easiest time being on the podcast. So that's always how I looked at it.
I guess I'm lucky because people never, oh man, your audio wasn't very good and blah, blah, blah. Even though sometimes I listen to it and it goes up and down with the music, because I like to play songs on my show, not on the YouTube or on YouTube. I only put the Zoom interviews up because I don't know how to edit video. I wish I did. And I'm telling you, I'm taking probably the simplest way that you can take. What I'm relying on, man, is my own knowledge of music and knowing people and how to talk to people to do this. You're far more advanced, and I admire that. I wish you lived down the street so I could come over to your place and check out your operation because it sounds absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and I
And
wish I was down the street from you as well, so I could come check out what you're doing and pick your brain on a couple of different aspects, especially from the audio side of things, because clearly when it comes to the like audio streaming wise, Apple Podcast, Spotify, your audience is bigger than mine. When it comes to the video side, I've got that over here, you. So how can we like if we were living down the street from each other, we'd be sharing resources all the time. We'd be sharing knowledge, we'd be having a blast with it. And
yeah,
before you know it, all of a sudden we have podcasts that interview sometimes similar bands but have different completely different approaches to them, absolutely killing it in the music space when it comes to podcasting. Like that would be sick.
yeah, I'd love to be part of a whole network, but it's hard to get involved in with those things. You hear about these network of podcasters out there, like iHeart and all these different people. They have a whole umbrella and they hire their podcasters. How can we get to that? I mean, I wouldn't mind getting a salary every year to like do my podcast, but
I'm in the same boat. Like I wouldn't mind that, but at the same time, when it comes to potentially being in a network, like part of a network of podcasts like that, just given the fact that it's more of a conglomerate and you're being put behind a corporate name or a corporate entity that's going to be backing you on that, what restrictions are they going to put on you as a
good point.
creator that are going to fit within their model? Because if someone's going to put restrictions on me in terms of we don't like the fact that you're doing this or that you're doing that, I'm like, well, see ya, I'm out. Because
It's a good point, Kevin. You're a smart guy.
the
The University of Minnesota did you good.
University of Minnesota and the craziness that has become my life has done me somewhat good. Yeah.
I got to ask you one other thing before I let you go. You said you have a job too. Are you in economics? Are you in the economics world out there now?
So my current job is managing data systems for a health insurance software company.
Okay, that sounds way more complex than being a podcaster. So I'm not going to ask you anything about that. At least your college education got you a good gig. Is it in Milwaukee?
It's the gig is in Milwaukee. Well, the office is in Milwaukee, but I have not worked out of the office since St. Patrick's Day of 2020. That was the last day before the whole entire COVID pandemic shutdown happened. Because the team that I work on there, the majority of the team was based outside of Milwaukee. Like we had at that time, we had someone in Denver, a couple people in Arizona, another person that was in Milwaukee moved out to Utah. So we had a lot more just differentiation. And during the pandemic, when we were all forced to be and work from home, we worked so much better because now all of us were on the same level. Now, as the company has shifted, they've put we brought in different people from the Philippines into our team. So it's okay if I'm in the office and everyone else is working from home. That's going to be a huge morale killer. And I'm not into that. I love the fact that, I can, if I have to be at my full-time job, yeah, I'll work, I'll have everything, but I don't have to be, be wearing a monkey suit or anything. I can sit there. I'll have conversations with people video wise while work, and I'll look exactly how I look talking to you right now. I'll have the hat on. I'll have a crazy Ice Nine Kills shirt on or a crazy Motionless in White shirt on. Everyone will look at me like, what the heck's going on here? But it's different. It's more fun, and it's created just, especially on the team I work on, just this insane feeling of, yeah, we're all just we're not going to just follow along with what everyone else is doing because we're different people than everybody else. So let's just have some fun with it and let's make it enjoyable for what it's worth.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm not going to leave you with that question because it has to be a music question to end it.
Yeah.
Okay, if I had to ask you and put you on the spot and say, who's your all-time like number one favorite band, artist, singer, the whole nine yards? Give me like two or three.
Okay.
Because I can never just give one.
Yeah, okay. So I was actually hoping you were going to ask something like this due to the fact that I've always thought about this where I always keep a list in my head of like, okay, who are my top 10 favorite bands? And for me, when it comes to it, right now, there are three that are sticking out more than anybody else. I'll go 3, 2, 1 on this one. I'll go.
Okay.
At number 3, you might be able to see the poster right behind me and the big flag right behind me. We Came as Romans. I don't know what it is. It took me so long to get into them. I love the name of the band. It's such a cool name, but I never ever really could get focused into their music. I heard the song Wasted Age back in 2020 for the first time. I was like, okay, this is where I have to start. I've seen them over the span of the last 2.5 years, 12 times. And every time I've had fantastic time seeing them live. the Welcome to Rockville show in 2022, where their set got cut short by they only got 6 songs in because of rain and thunderstorms, but they front loaded their set and the rain was coming down during their set. It's something I never forget, and it's one of those bands where I go and see them and my mind just goes to a different place in terms of how much fun I'm gonna have. Coming number 2, I got the shirt on right now, Ice Nine Kills. The first time I ever saw them live, it was a fluke because I went to go see Light the Torch instead. That's what I wanted to go see, and Ice Nine Kills was the headliner. I'm like, maybe I'll be in this. We'll see what happens. 2 hours and 19 songs later, I'm like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my entire life. The whole concept around the horror movies, putting them into music, but making these songs sound like they are the horror movie and putting everything together. The beauty that Spencer Charn is able to write with just really connects with me on how everything works, and just I can't get enough of it. And my all-time favorite band, I've already mentioned it before, I've talked about them already, is Rise Against, which is
The
crazy.
good one.
All my top 10 bands right now, all metalcore. The only one that's not metalcore outside there is probably From Ashes to New, which is more the rap rock, rap metal, new metal infusion. But Rise Against just sticks out as like a sore thumb in that. But for me, it's the band I listen to that makes me feel the most like myself. It's the band I listen to that just allows me to just enjoy everything else that's going around, even with, a lot of the political stuff, where even if I don't agree with what they're saying or fully agree with it, I can still embrace it. I can still enjoy it because the music is just that good, and the way they present it is so eloquently done, from the vocals of Tim McElrath and the lyrics he writes. He's my number one all-time wanted guest for the podcast. If I ever get to interview him, not if, when I get to,
I was going to ask you that question.
I might shit my pants on like during the recording. It's going to be bad.
I had Juliana Hatfield on the show, and I was really nervous and Louise Post from Veruca Salt. Some of the guests can really you're looking at them and they're listening to, and you're like, oh my God. Hey, Kevin, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, bud. And best part about this isn't goodbye, because we're going to do this on the flip side with the Chord Progression Podcast. This can't be goodbye. This is going to be, as I always say, see you later.
I have a feeling you're going to be a better interviewer than I was, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.